Hi, I'm Femi Oke. On today's episode of The Stream, we take a look at an intimate film about a Korean family growing up in the 1980s in rural Arkansas that is resonating with Asian Americans today. Minari is an intimate look at the Asian American experience with great candor at a time when Asian Americans themselves are facing racist attacks in America. Have you seen the film? What did you think about it? You can jump into our YouTube comments and be part of today's show.
David, look! They're wheels! Wheels? 여기 대체 어디야?
집이지. 우리 새로 시작한다고 그랬잖아. 이게 그거야. 아빠는 빅 가든 하나 만들 거야.
What a wonderful day to be in the house of the Lord. If you're here with us for the first time, please stand. What a beautiful family. Glad you're here.
How's your daddy like that new farm? He growing things good, doing things right?
Yes.
미국 애들은 할머니랑 같이 방 쓰는 거 싫어한다던데.
But I don't like Grandma.
쟤는 안 그래요. 한국애니까.
Grandma smells like Korea.
야, 뭐라고? 그랜마 스멜?
우리 여기 있다가 망할 거야. 애들을 위해서라도 한 번 더 생각해 볼 수 있잖아.
애들도 한 번쯤 아빠가 뭔가 해내는 거 봐야 될 거 아니야.
Joining us to talk about Minari and why it is resonating, why people are loving it in the United States right now. We have Esther, we have Anthony, we have Bing. It's really nice to see you. Panelists, we have to agree right now, no spoilers, okay? No spoilers. Don't give away the film. We can possibly help it. Esther, welcome to The Stream. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Thanks so much for having me. My name is Esther Yoonji Kang. I'm a reporter at NPR's affiliate in Chicago, WBEZ, and I cover race, class, and communities for the station, including Asian American communities here.
Thank you for being with us. Hello, Anthony. Tell us who you are. What does the international audience need to know about you?
Hi, I'm Anthony Ocampo. I'm a writer and sociology professor based in Los Angeles. And like Esther, I focus a lot on immigration, Asian American issues, and happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Hello, Bing. Introduce yourself to our international audience around the world.
Hi, Femi. My name is Bing Chen. I'm a third culture kid. I'm also a serial entrepreneur who's devoted to building new worlds that deliver socioeconomic equity, particularly against an organization known as Gold House. We're the largest collective of API leaders in the country. And as it relates to Minari, we're focused on systemic solutions to ensure the accurate and prominent portrayal of API stories, people, and so forth.
Right, so good to have you, everybody. We asked a lot of Asian Americans about this film, and they were very forthcoming about why they liked it, the impact it had on them. Have a listen to them, and then I want you to pick up off the back of them.
The movie felt very real and authentic to the Asian immigrant experience. I'm not Korean myself, but even just like the really small things, like how the different generations act, or how the grandchildren act around the grandparents. It's just feels good to be recognized in that way.
You know, just like the characters in the movie, my parents came over with limited English and had to work a lot of labor's jobs, and just to get where they are now, just to provide for their families. And so to start from scratch and like to build up your own business and start a whole new life in America is relatable to any Asian American.
And all of our guests are nodding their heads. Esther, articulate your nod. Go ahead.
Well, when you guys played the trailer at the beginning, I started tearing up all over again. I think that was my reaction initially when I first saw the trailer for the first time. And, when the movie, I finally got to watch it, the first 15 minutes, I was already extremely emotional. And at the end of the film, I had my own memories just flooding back to me in a way that's never happened to me before. And so there's a real power in seeing yourself on the screen. I didn't even know to expect it or to want it. And Minari is the first movie that, it's happened for me. And so I found it incredibly powerful.
Anthony, I saw you grinning during the trailer, not only grinning, but leaning in. And I know you've already seen the film.
Yeah.
What made you smile again?
I mean, the grinning is the way to cover up the fact that I was about to tear up just like Esther, because it's just such a rare moment to see Asian American stories on screen. I watched the film, but the point where I really lost it is when I listened to an interview with Lee Isaac Chung, who wrote the film, and just the my God, I'm getting goosebumps right now. Just the fight that there is for Asian Americans to be able to render themselves in print and screen. That never happens. And so when it all came to head in Minari and we got to just experience the full humanity of Asian Americans, I thought, how rare is this moment?
Bing.
I wish I could say I could cry, but I hit my tear quota earlier this week because it's been a terrible week. No, I think my first reaction is we have to remember this is not just about representation. This film is just excellent. And this is one of the only 4 films in history to win the 2 top prizes at Sundance, the Grand Jury Prize and the Audience Prize, aka this is the best film and the most popular film. And it also, of course, as we all know, has famously made Steve Yeun its star, its Korean-American star, no less, the first Asian-American actor to be nominated for Best Actor at the Oscars. So that unto itself needs to be celebrated. But I think the other piece that Anthony and Esther are really astutely pointing to is the reason this is also really special is because it's at once an Asian and an American story, and by virtue of that, an Asian-American story that we just have never seen. I mean, on the Asian side, you know, we're on the backdrop of Crazy Rich Asians and the bling empires of the world, which we love and absolutely has space, but we also forget the API diaspora has the widest income disparity of any community in this country. And so looking at someone who's a farmer who's trying to live their American dream in the bucolic South in Arkansas, it's just really special as an Asian. And then on the American side, I mean, there's barely any English in this film. And this reminds me that, you know, 75% of APIs grow up in a bilingual household in this country. 80% of Hispanics grow up in a bilingual household, and it's entirely Spanish-driven. And so it just reminds us of this not only new face of America, but this face and voice of America that has been here and how that's going to perpetuate new conversations about what that even means.
Bing, I totally see that. And I want to just explain for people who haven't seen the film. It's a very simple premise. It's the story of the Yi family who moved to rural Arkansas, and Mr. Yi, Jacob, has a plan to build a farm. So it's the American dream, but with Korean Americans, and they struggle. That is every immigrant story all over the world, which I think is one of the reasons that so many people gravitate towards the story. I'm going to see if I can wring some tears out of Bing by sharing this clip. Take a look.
Won't happen.
고춧가루. 여긴 이런 걸 구할 수가 없어. 멸치도 가져온 거야?
야, 또 울어? 멸치 때문에 울어?
Big themes, family. Bing, you're heartless. I'll come back to you later.
My heart's just frozen.
Yeah. These are big things. Family, literally the tastes and smells of home. It means so much to all of you, even Bing, about connecting. And Bing, when you were saying this idea about you don't see this depiction on movies. You haven't done this before. Esther, you start.
You know, you have got to stop playing these clips. I'm not going to make it through the end of the segment. You know, as my fellow panelists mentioned, Asian Americans have some of the widest disparities in terms of income, household income, and education in the U.S. You've got the very top of the top, and then you've got the very bottom. And so something that was really helpful was in Minari, you saw this farmer, and I remember my own parents and just how they struggle to put on food on the table, and all the different jobs that they tried, the language barriers, me having to translate for them, when they had any sort of dealings with the government. These are all memories that are deeply embedded. And I actually, as you know, just over the years, I've been in this country now for more than 30 years, I have sort of suppressed them or forgotten about them. And this is the movie that brought it all back. And I think that it's really important to depict these struggles in a very accurate and detailed and careful, but also these poignant, beautiful ways. And so I think that's what Minari is for us. And I hope to see many more films like it in the future.
I'm thinking about the grandma,
yeah,
Anthony.
the part of...
Yeah, go ahead.
You read my mind. I was just
the granny.
I was I was a kid of immigrants that was raised by a grandma because mom and dad were working so much, and so for me, the grandmother character was just the anchor. I think about like the character in the film. My grandmother was someone that experienced war in the home country, but never really spoke about it. But you could see the ways in which that experience, that trauma, played into the way they experience their life, even here in the United States. And so, I mean, that food scene, just the honing in on that moment of joy that just means so much for the grandmother and the daughter and the whole family. It just literally reminded me of my entire upbringing growing up with my grandma in that multi-generational household.
This is a very special grandma, so I'm going to play one more clip from the film, and then I'm going to move on to what Bing was talking about, which was the reality right now in the States and the headlines that are making news for Asian American communities around the country. Here's one last look, though, at Minari and the grandma.
아유, 대단하다.
할머니는 진짜 할머니 같지 않아요.
할머니 같은 게 뭔데?
쿠키도 만들고 나쁜 말도 안 하고 남자 팬티도 안 입고.
그래? 그럼
하지 마.
그러면 산에서 온 이슬물이나 갖고 와. 그거 마시자.
싫어.
싫어? 이리 와. 아이고, pretty boy.
I'm not pretty. I'm good looking.
So at the same time as so many Asian Americans are delighted at the success of Minari and all the nominations it's getting, then this becomes the headlines. Atlanta shootings, Asian women among 8 killed at 3 US spas. One story. But in the background of that, has been happening in the past 12 months, is this idea of a reality of attacks on Asian communities, Asian elderly, just Asian people. And then hashtag Stop Asian Hate, that hashtag going viral. It's a conversation that needs to be into the mainstream. It is getting there. Bing, how do you make the connection between a beautiful, intimate, candid film and the headlines that we're seeing right now in America?
Yeah, I mean, I think it underscores, Femi, that life is rosy, right? It'll flower with beautiful things and then it'll prick you. And that's just the unfortunate reality of being a dual identity individual, an Asian American, an Asian woman, and so forth and so on, is you have to hold one thing you love and one thing that also makes your life challenging. I mean, when I think about all of the Stop Asian Hate activity, I'm obviously enthused because our community, for really the first time ever, but certainly the first time in any form of this in 60 years, is rallying together to fight back even harder. The challenge, as you know, is there are just multiple sort of confounding factors here. We're not just talking about an Asian populace. The majority of those attacked are women and elders, which underscores a larger sort of widespread pernicious reality against women and women of color. Second is, especially, I don't want to decenter the spa experience here, that is a lower income experience. And once again, we have to ask ourselves, are we doing enough for all economic brackets in our community? And then finally, of course, this is a broader weapons conversation. The fact that an individual citizen can buy an assault weapon easily is ridiculous in this country. Needless to say, we also need thorough background checks, though that would not have prevented what happened, unfortunately, in Atlanta. The second piece, though, in terms of how we piece together this near-term, these near-term incidents with the affirming portrayals of Minari, are that there are two ways to solve anything. There's what we call sticks and then what we call carrots. Sticks are near-term punitive corrective measures, providing financial relief to the victims and the victims' families that exist. But second is we also need to get to the core of the issue. And a lot of these issues stem from the notion of perpetual foreigner syndrome, where Asians throughout history have sometimes been invited into this country or been invited to corporations, but haven't been fully integrated, where they're fully accepted, where they're fully empowered to ascend to the C-suite ranks. And so the reason art is so important on this second tranche, this carrot piece, is because we need positive and affirming multitudinal portrayals of our people, so they don't just see us as one-dimensional beings as was created in the 60s with notions like the model minority. But then secondly, we also have to use art as well as the economy as weapons, where we can financially empower ourselves to not only empower our communities, but also empower others as well to know our contribution. So it's a very complex issue, but I do think about it in those two halves.
Anthony, I want to play this to you. This is Helen Yin, and she talks about the conversation about the hate attacks on the Asian American communities and how the hashtags are bringing people together and her take on that. And then I'm going to get you to come immediately off the back of Helen. Let's have a look. Let's have a listen.
I started out as feeling a lot of grief, but now I'm just angry. I'm angry that our hashtag is even Stop Asian Hate, because I don't understand why people hate us. And of those people who hate us so badly, I don't see how I could ever change their perspective, because it's so deep rooted. For someone to push our grandpa into the ground so hard that his bones break, or punch our grandma so violently that her eyes bleed, or minimize the death of our mom and say that it was due to the result of someone's bad day, I will never understand it. But now we live in fear, and there's no end date, and I just don't know what to do.
To the point that was just made, and to thinking about Bing's point, there's a lot of people point to the Asian hate as somehow starting with what happened with Donald Trump saying this was a China virus, right? And I think if we look a little bit deeper in history, we'll see that anti-Asian violence and anti-Asian sentiment has extended far beyond the presidency of Donald Trump. I mean, we think about post 9/11, there were attacks on South Asians, there were attacks on Sikh Americans. If we think about the Watsonville riots of the 1920s that targeted Filipino Americans, and you can't separate the way that these women were so dehumanized by the killer. You can't divorce that from the fact that Asian women on a global scale are perceived to be subservient. They're sexualized by this country, and you see how complicit folks are whenever jokes are made about Asian women as nothing more than sexual objects, and the fact that there's probably millions of us in this country that have heard that. And how many folks have actually interjected and spoke up when those kind of comments were made? That all contributes to what happened in Atlanta.
Esther, I want to play you as a journalist a comment from Tom, who is a filmmaker, so making that connection between the news and art and creativity. This is what Tom has to say about the recent headlines with attacks on Asian Americans, and then again, come immediately off the back of his comment. Let's have a look.
And then I turn on the news and all I hear is a national debate whether the Atlanta shooting is a sex crime or a hate crime. And that's been the most infuriating point, because it feels like a diversion from what we should be focused on. I mean, why is there even a debate? What are we debating about? It's a hate crime. And it's dismissive and it's insulting that we're debating about this, not the real issues. It feels like America telling the Asian American community, you know what? It feels like a bargain, right? It's like, we'll give you hate crime and you guys quiet down for a little bit. And, personally, I think this is far from being over.
Absolutely. What Tom is saying there is really resonating with me as a member of the media. In the last week or so, just the coverage has been less than acceptable, I think. And so something to remember is that objectivity really does not exist. And so when Asian journalists are told that they cannot cover the story, even with their language skills, even with their cultural knowledge, that they cannot cover these stories because they are Asians and they're unable to be objective, that means that the media will miss the true story. They will not be able to get the real story because they lack that access. So I think something that, so many people have just taken on the police statements as fact, and that's been really. I'm gonna have to say it's interesting, because since when do we just assume that whatever the perpetrator says is the actual?
What do you really mean when you say interesting, Esther?
Well, what do I really mean? I mean, as a journalist, I think we need to do better. I think we need to find out what really happened. And if you don't have journalists who can get to these communities, speak the language, get into these immigrant neighborhoods, and do the reporting that's really required to do these stories justice, then we're not going to be able to get the real story. We are just going to be parroting what the police say and what the perpetrator says.
Anthony, go ahead.
And yeah, and I think in the moments when we see, particularly our women from our community, Asian American women, I think about the journalist Kimmy Yam, who has been covering anti-Asian violence for much of the past couple years. And every single time that she takes it upon herself to center the story of violence against Asian American women, she experiences misogynist backlash on social media, emails. And so I just think about what role do cis men have to play in all of this happening?
Bing, I'm just looking at your Twitter feed, and it's full of activism.
Oh God.
Right? It's full of activism.
And popcorn.
I'm just going to show the meaningful, deep stuff here, where you're talking about people are saying, how can we help support the Asian American communities? And you are giving them ideas, you're retweeting, you're sharing, and then you're also looking at leadership as well as an answer to the issues that we're bringing up right now in this conversation. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, let's piggyback off that, Ms. Okay, and then let's piggyback off what Anthony said.
Yeah.
Let's be very clear. Violence against women is not an issue for women. This is mostly because of men. There are some women who attack women, but this is a male problem, period. And so there are two solutions here, as always. Number one, the words of Frederick Douglass, it is sometimes easier to grow good children than it is to repair broken men. The fact that a fourth of us, including myself, under the age of 18 in this country, grow up in a single-parent household that's almost always a mother, indicates that our emotional and economic center of gravity is a woman, which makes us reimagine what is possible, that we grow up respecting women. So we need to find solace and encouragement that is happening and continue to raise children that understand that gender is a strength and is something that needs to be seen as equitable. The other side, though, is we need to repair a lot of these broken men. The fact that an individual can have a euphemistic bad day, which is, by the way, on that captain, and I'm glad that he's gone right now for the time being, the fact that he can euphemize that and then default as a domestic terrorist to fetishizing women for their own death is insanity, is absolute insanity. And so there's a couple things that we have to decouple here. One is correcting those sick individuals and domestic terrorists. And there's a lot of not only education, but punitive measures that need to go down there. But the second piece as well is what Esther was alluding to, and that's media's fallacy here. There were two big issues that I as a consumer was troubled by. Number one, the fact that I knew that this domestic terrorist went to church before I even knew the release names of the victims. Asterisk, we need to make sure that victims' families are comfortable with that, is insanity, is crazy. Why in the world would we humanize an individual domestic terrorist? And by the way, we did the same thing with insurrectionists, right? Including Mr. Buffalo Bill in the bikini, who apparently couldn't eat certain foods in his jail cell. And so media needs to do a better job of not just being thoughtful of pronouncing names right and getting the sequence right, but doing their homework. And that's incumbent on all of us. So that's number one. The broader issue, though, is I go back to carrots and sticks, right? This is a long-term generational solution, and it is going to take both policy and punitive measures like what Congressman Andy Kim does in trying to empower more API and really multicultural leaders. But the other half, and this needs to be a great rallying cry for all of us, is if we wait for the law to keep us safe, we are too late. There are already 6 Asian women dead.
Right. Bing.
You look at,
And Anthony and Esther, what I think is extraordinary that we got to this point from a movie. It was a beautiful, moving movie, but it opens up a bigger conversation. There was one thing, guests, thank you, superb. There's one thing that I know you're all wondering, if you haven't seen the film yet, have a look at my laptop. What on earth is Minari? Have a look here. It grows in the pockets of immigrants, dies in the first year, flourishes in the second, purifies the water and soil around it. It is a plant, it is a herb. And if you haven't seen it yet, Minari is currently streaming on all and most good streaming platforms. And if you're lucky and you can go to the movie theatre safely, you can also see it in the movie theatre. Esther, Bing, Anthony, thank you for being on the stream today. Appreciate you. Take care.